Hi everyone, welcome to my case study for EDL 850. My name is Lori Mahan. The copyright issues at St. Regis. So I believe that as principal at St. Regis, I have the duty to carefully balance the interests of all stakeholders. This means it's my job to consider finances, those employed by the schools and the surrounding community, along with the school's function of educating students. So the first part of this is the PTA. The PTA puts in tremendous efforts to continue fundraising, and it must be considered that this does take a lot of effort and does do a great job of funding our school. Secondly, the teacher point of view. Teachers want the best for their students. This includes the newest, best technology that they can get their hands on. Third, we have the community. The community funds the school through their taxes, but it's important to keep in mind, I think, that any financial liabilities would add burden to the taxpayers, and this would include any fines given for violating laws. Fourth, we have the Board of Ed and the superintendent. They want a well-run school. They don't want violation of any laws. So it's become my job as principal to find the right balance and to attempt to find a way that makes everybody happy. So taking a look at the current laws versus current needs. Software is covered under copyright laws. It's not covered under fair use, which means that schools don't have the same fair use exception that they would with printed material. Licensed software cannot be duplicated except to have a backup copy, which should only be used in case of the original. Shareware is a different story. This can be copied and distributed. However, then the school must decide whether to adopt the software and pay for it or not to adopt it and destroy all the copies. St. Regis currently needs to build its software library. However, I don't believe this should be done at the expense of the creator or distributor of the software. Obviously, schools do carry a burden to use funds wisely, as Ms. Lynn pointed out. It creates less of a burden on the taxpayers, not to mention the PTA. However, this shouldn't really be done in violation of the rights of others. So should the school receive penalties for illegal copies, then the burden becomes greater. So it's a matter of finding a balance between the law and the funds available. Current legal issues. Ms. Brandon is absolutely correct in her concern for copyright laws. While copyright laws do have a fair use exception, this doesn't apply to computer software. There's only two reasons to copy computer software, and that's your computer backup and the copy the computer might make on its own. Neither one applies. So Ms. Lynn does need to take back the software that she has illegally reproduced. Now, as far as Ms. Lynn, I think I would sit with her and review the copyright laws. I think that she is truly trying to do the school a service and save money, and I think just a clear explanation of copyright laws and how this could end up costing the school more money would be a great way to let Ms. Lynn know that while I appreciate her efforts, we have to kind of put them somewhere else here. And also, it would take over PTA funds. If we had to pay a copyright violation, then that would probably be another fundraiser for the PTA. Other stakeholders. The PTA, my guess, is they are not aware of the laws. If they were upset, I would be happy to sit with them and explain the laws and what violations could cost. My guess is they are most likely very reasonable, but just not knowledgeable about the laws at hand. Now, some teachers are requesting software that's being copied illegally. It is my opinion that the best solution here would be to, first of all, search for some online free or low-cost programs that may do the same thing. I also think it might be an option to find a way to give teachers more computer lab time that they could run on their own without Ms. Lynn, or purchase more licenses for the software they're asking for. At this point, I think it's important to do a budget review and take a look at the funds that we really need to start putting into technology to keep our students up to date on the latest in learning. Involving community members. It's been my experience, first of all, that having a planning committee is a great way of allowing the community to be a part of policy making. I think also it's important for the principal to be present and seen. This would include going to PTA meetings, discussing new policies with them, discussing the reasons behind the new policy. And finally, I think it's important for a principal to have an open door policy, just to say, make an appointment with me, we'll sit down, we'll talk about this. To be available for community concerns, I think, is something that's extremely important. New policies. Obviously, St. Regis is in need of some new policies to prevent this from happening in the future. I think I would want to sit with the superintendent and start developing an acceptable use policy. This might be something that we would have a committee for. Seeing that we have computers in the classrooms, a computer lab for students, we definitely need an acceptable use policy. This is going to state exactly how we expect these school-owned computers to be used and what would not be considered acceptable use. Within this policy, I would definitely put a very clear statement that the computer user agrees to abide by all laws, including copyright laws, and I would request that this be signed off. The copyright policy would be not only for students but for staff as well, and this policy would include a very clear statement as to what constitutes fair use. I would outline how computer software is affected by the policies, and I would make it very clear that illegal copies of software are not permissible to be stored on the school computers, because that could put the school in jeopardy of financial sanctions. Operations and management. How would I communicate the policies, laws, regulations? Well, I think it's important to put this out into the community and to my teachers as much as I can. That would include email, video, bringing it up at staff meetings, putting it into the student handbook as well as the teacher handbook. I think that as far as teachers go, there would be a need to communicate the consequences for violating copyright laws. This not only protects the staff personally, but professionally as well. We would review the acceptable use policy, the repercussions for not following it. More importantly, I think it's important to make sure that teachers understand that I do know that there is a need for tech, and we will be considering other options to purchase more licenses, because they need to know that they're being heard and understood in order to feel like they're important to the operation and management of the school. Monitoring the policies. First of all, I really believe that with knowledge of the laws, most people are going to be able to monitor their own use. But at this point, I do feel like we would need to look into apps and software that could possibly monitor classroom and computer lab computers. I would even suggest that we start making funds and putting them aside for hiring someone who would be in charge of monitoring this, possibly a tech team or a tech person. At this point, I think Miss Lynn might be a good candidate once she understands the laws and rules. I think that she might be willing to help the school out to protect the students and the teachers. So how can I improve the quality and efficiency with technology? Well, I would definitely from now on be setting aside a portion of the budget for technology and software, planning with a committee to oversee the needs, keep an eye on new and useful applications for the district, make sure we're on the cutting edge of technology. I would want to, as I spoke about, designate a staff member or a team or possibly a new hire if the budget allows. And along with having this person in charge of maintaining and monitoring the equipment, they would research software or apps that would monitor and track the computers. Finally, implementing policies and monitoring compliance. This would be done with a committee. Hopefully would have teachers, Board of Education members, community members, and I would go ahead and distribute this through as many places as I possibly could: videos, emails, slideshows, website, within the teacher and student handbooks. And I think it's very important to have not only students but teachers sign off on the policies. Finally, how would this support the students and teachers at St. Regis? Well, students need access to this technology, and my goal is to increase their access and bring in as many programs as I can, but to do it in a way that sets a good example, is ethical and legal. As far as teachers, I 100% understand they want the best they can for their students. If their concerns are not taken into consideration, this has an effect on school climate. Finding some money in the budget to supply what they're asking for would make them feel heard, make their concerns valid, and educating them on the law, I would hope they would see that as a way to protect them rather than harass them. Finally, the community. I'm trying to give them input as far as the policies, holding meetings with the community, even having a monthly meeting where they could come in and sit and voice their opinions or their concerns and discuss it with me is a great way to promote collaboration among everyone. And community support is so important to the school environment and increasing student achievement. So thank you for watching my slideshow.